Hi y'all. The story I chose was Saundra Santiago. So it's assignment E, uh, theory-based presentation. So I want to start off with an agenda. So we have obviously the questions that were presented to us. What are the clients presenting issues and or reasons for referral? What is your understanding of what's going on currently with the client? If it's individual, family, or group. What do you know about the individual and their family ongoing contacts, i.e., immediate environment, school, extended family settings, social support networks, faith, communities, trauma history, social positioning, factors, and experience of discrimination, and other psychosocial factors. Choosing your two mid-level theories, and critical praise the strengths and limitations of each theory in the context of your case study. Which theory would you ultimately recommend to be used with your client? What additional issues might be important to consider for working with this client? So Uh, what are the clients presenting issues and other reasons for referral? Sandra is currently in a relationship with Eric, who is abusing Sandra physically, verbally, and emotionally. Domestic violence. Sandra wants to leave Eric, but is unsure what is the first step to take. Sandra has a history of experiencing traumatic events. Sandra's adolescence was filled with physical violence and domestic violence between her parents actually. Sandra has a history of illicit substance use as well. Um, What is your understanding of what's going on currently with the client? So Sandra has no support from her biological family. They kind of cut her off when she made some allegations. We'll get that further to that. Sandra received little to no nurturing as an adolescent and now struggles distinguishing between love and support with physical violence. Sandra seeks attention from others. Sandra does receive support from her friend Maria, who encouraged her to get support and help her initiate contact with Safe Haven Shelter. Sandra loves poetry and expresses herself through her journal. So she does have expressing herself verbally, but is pretty good with her. She's pretty good with writing in her journal, so she's able to express herself that way. Um, One sec. What do you know? What do we know about the individual and their family, ongoing contacts? Immediate environment, school, extended family settings, social support and discrimination. Oh, sorry, apologize. Social support and network, faith communities, trauma history, social positioning, factors and experiences of discrimination, and psychosocial factors. Sandra does not have a relationship with her parents, but does speak with her sister. Well, attempted to speak with her sister one time since she got into safe haven shelter. Sandra's intellectual function is average, and she does seem to want. She does not seem want to further her education at this moment. It's not mentioned in the article that she had any goals in regards to her education. Sandra does have a friend that she does receive support from her friend. Sandra does receive support from her friend Maria, and Sandra has a history of being physically and sexually abused. Sandra has a history of homicidal ideation, which mentioned in her story. She had an issue when her parents were committing domestic violence amongst each other. She wanted to end the violence herself. Sandra refused to obtain supportive services from the Department of Social Services and currently has no medical coverage. Sandra's parents refused to believe her stepbrother sexually abused her, physically abused her, and discriminated her. Her parents actually physically abused her and discriminated her after she informed them about what was occurring to her. The client feels small and unloved due to traumatic experiences. Sandra isolates in sharing traumatic events. She struggles. She isolates when she shares those traumatic events, as evident by when she shared with the group at Safe Haven. She isolated right after, and kind of staff members were fearing that she was going to go back to her abusive boyfriend. The two mid-level theories that I chose are cognitive behavior therapy and conflict theory. Um, I ended up choosing going with cognitive behavior therapy, and I put more attention to it. Just several reasons. I believe CBT has a solution or has a way to get um, a way to get back in to improve your mental health and so forth. And why conflict theory kind of explains why she's in that situation and the lack of resources provides her that put in that position. So I did dedicate more time to CBT. So the two articles I highlighted on this slide are cognitive behavior therapy for PTSD and depression symptoms reduces risk for further intimate partner violence among interpersonal trauma survivors, and applying cognitive behavior therapy to help survivors of dating violence. And this was a pilot study. So in both articles, it mentioned that natural service indicated that approximately 25% of women will experience in intimate partner violence going forward IPV. Prevalence estimates for one of the most common consequences of IPV is development of PTSD and depression. So you see that it's very common with individuals, mainly women, uh, to get PTSD and depression. CBT is used during therapy to help clients identify cognitive distortions that interfere with recovery of PTSD. Since this was a PowerPoint, I didn't want to add too much information, but now that I can speak on it, they did writing examples, and so they had 6 sessions of 60 minutes, and they would write down their traumatic events, go over them, and so forth. They didn't divulge personal information. Well, in the study, they didn't divulge what was actually experienced, but it did help women change their cognitive distortions. Of the 150 women who participated, 81% of them completed the 6-month follow-up assessment and therefore provided outcome data. Additionally, participants who completed the follow-up assessment reported significantly lower PTSD severity and lower depression levels. So it seems it really worked for them. CBT continued. These two other articles I chose to highlight on this one were adapting cognitive behavior therapy for depressed adolescents exposed to interpersonal trauma, a case study with two teens, cognitive behavior therapy for the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, a review. Substantial body of evidence links childhood interpersonal trauma to risk for major depression in adolescence and childhood. So it goes to show you that the domestic violence that she witnessed as she was younger did lead up to for her to most likely get these later mental health issues. She was more likely to get them. Large-scale prospective studies using nationally represented samples have reported that 2 to 5-fold increase of risk of depression among adolescents with a history of physical abuse, sexual abuse, or neglect. She actually had all three of those. She had physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. She was neglected after she tried to tell her parents that her stepbrother was sexually abusing her. Cognitive behavior therapy treatment and depression protocol developed by Munoz, Aguilar, Cacciola, and Guzman, adapted for adolescent therapy, produced significant changes in adolescent depressive symptoms. Therefore, we adapted this empirical supported protocol for depressed adolescents with interpersonal trauma. Histories by integrating executive functioning training throughout this protocol and addressing explicitly trauma-related beliefs. The study concluded with both teens showed improvement in depressive symptoms and less relapses. Um, so going further into that, I didn't want to be too clinical with it because it's 10 minutes and I don't want to write too much on it. It ends up that there was a study that 2 years later people will relapse and go back into these behaviors that depressive behaviors and actually return with the abusive individual. The current literature reveals the robust evidence that CBT is safe and effective intervention for both acute and chronic PTSD following a range of traumatic experience in adults, children, and adolescents. I'm not sure. I think I lost the video. I kind of messed up on that. I hit it incorrectly, so I'm trying to redo it. If I messed up, I apologize. I'm struggling with this. It took me like an hour to find how to do this, and hopefully I'm doing it correctly. But I'm gonna approach it again. Conflict theory. So parent-offspring conflict theory, an evolutionary framework of understanding conflict within human families, is what the article I wrote, peer review article. It was hard to find articles on this topic actually, so that's one of another reasons I chose CBT. Um, so decades of research demonstrate that conflict shapes and permeates a broad range of family processes. Um, Parent-child conflict identify contexts and outcomes that correlate with conflict and trace its developmental course over time. Parent-child conflict tends to be more frequent and intense in divorced families and between step relatives. So when Saundra was in this position, she actually lost out, and her stepbrother actually got more resources and attention paid to them, and even started a major traumatic event for her, in which she eventually left her house because of this traumatic event. So parent-child conflict has to be more. How should she distribute the mother? How should the mother distribute these resources among her offspring? Typically, it should be distributed equally. Which say is five child, each of them gets 20% of her her resources. But it shows that that's not the way it works. Mothers distribute the her resource unequally, and the underlying logic is quite different. However, it looks at the same decision from the is given to they decide which offspring to favor. Um, the offspring that gets favored gets most of the resources and demands a greater respect of parental investment in itself. Relative to its siblings, the parent has been selected to give. I'm sorry, there's something in my way. I can't even read what I wrote. Um, this issue essentially saying that her her mother, her parents invested more in her brother, which let her be have more issues in the future with her mental health. I'm sorry about that. I just have a little screen that's messing me up. Oh, can I not move? Oh, and I can't even get this rid of. Let me stop this. So I think I figured this out. I had to redo my last three slides. I noticed it didn't record properly. So back to conflict theory. I apologize for these errors. It just um, my face is blocking my what I wrote down, so I apologize. So conflict theory. So Sandra's highest level of parent-child conflict resulted in more child behavior problems for Saundra. So it just shows that the conflict theory, what they're saying, um, the investment in each child. Saundra received less parental investment, resulting in traumatic incidents such as being abused sexually and physically beaten. For example, when this occurred, instead of supporting the client, getting her the right support, they ended up kind of chastising her and calling her a liar, and eventually led her for her to get other. The traumatic incident, as well as her parent-child conflict, led to Sandra's mental health issues, uh, and for Saundra to devalue attention, no, to value attention, no matter in which form she receives it. And this is evident by her constantly wanting attention from, in the article said boys and other things. So, conflict theory just demonstrates the barriers that she faced, and didn't really provide a solution. That's why I kind of chose not to follow this one and proceed with CBT more. This is just a list of my references for the articles I chose. I'm sorry, just I having a lot of issues towards the end, so I apologize for that. But here are the references, and I'll try to attach the link to my presentation.